Awesome. So today we are really looking to talk about how the Anaplan platform can drive value in a condensed timeline by leveraging, best practices both from a design perspective and functionality within repeatable use cases. Jay Abraham, you want to just do a brief intro on yourself before we get started?
Sure. Hi. So Jay Spector joined Blackstone coming up on 2 years ago. I sit within our HR and strategic incentives function in a role spanning across it that looks at that includes both oversight of workforce planning, but also how we integrate in terms of compensation with our FP&A corporate budget partners.
Hey everybody, Abraham Albert, Vice President of Planning with Revantage. If you're not familiar with Revantage, we are a portfolio company at Blackstone. We support Blackstone's real estate portfolio companies, a lot of services like HR functions, tax, treasury, kind of all the functions that we help provide value-added services to drive value to the whole ecosystem. Happy to be here. I was wondering who the 4 o'clock crowd is and what they look like, so this is good.
I'm Steve Lemker. I'm a partner at Alpha within our EPM practice. I head up our insurance and FP&A verticals, and I think everybody knows Ankit, but...
Hi, everyone. Ankit Jain. I'm the mystery guest on this through this 30 minutes. I'm with our finance and workforce application CRE. We build best-in-class applications to solve for specific domain problems, and so excited to be here.
Awesome. Thank you. So both of you and both of your organizations have been leveraging the Anaplan platform for multiple years. Can you talk just a little bit about how you actually are leveraging it today within your organizations?
Yeah. You want to take it first? I'll go.
Sure. Sounds good. Blackstone's been using Anaplan far before I joined, since I think about 2017. We have many use cases across both all of our investment businesses as well as our corporate functions. So everything from portfolio analytics, allocations and cash flow calculations, regulatory requirements, using it as kind of a submission tool for corporate deliverables, as well as the more traditional forecasting use cases. My group in particular has used Anaplan for many years for our annual compensation process, where we collect compensation decisions from around the organization. Blackstone started with more of a siloed approach of building Anaplan models to meet specific use cases that had an immediate high business impact. I would say now it's evolved much more so to be focused on the connectivity between those models and how we can kind of build from a firm-wide perspective, standardize across both business units and kind of corporate processes. And so what I've come in and done with my team is build out our workforce planning model across the organization. And so the focus with that has been that historically, workforce planning, we've had a really good data foundation in terms of the latest activity in Workday, building that into dashboards and databases, et cetera. But in terms of forward-looking headcount information that's really living in the minds of our business users, that's stayed decentralized. Groups have been managing that on their own, which is where we want the accountability to live, but it makes it really difficult to manage from a firm prioritization and execution perspective. So the workforce planning models we've been able to build have kind of centralized that all in one place while keeping the ownership with the business users, and at the same time integrated it with our full FP&A corporate budget process.
Yeah, and for Revantage, we've been on a journey for a little while, and I would say it started before I even arrived at Revantage. So one of the things that we do, helping other portfolio companies with a number of different services we provide, tracking who we're helping and the time we're spending with them is really important to us. So one of the first things we did is we implemented time tracking with Anaplan, and this was very granular. And I think the theme for Revantage is we need our data at the most granular level. Probably much more so than I think the typical company. So for example, we would budget and forecast at a vendor level instead of just a P&L line. So time tracking is really important. That's when it became part of what Revantage used in order to track everybody's time and how they allocate that time to different portfolio companies, what service they're providing those portfolio companies by employee, by week. And that's really important for us to know where that service is going and who it's benefiting. So that was how we got introduced to it and have put it in place, and has really done well for us. Then from there, we've built out an allocation model within it. So all of our expenses, being able to know that allocation, where that's coming from, and who it's supporting throughout the whole organization. Additionally, our workforce planning. So that's been a big module that we've built out to be able to support how we look at all of our headcount, how we plan for compensation, how we plan for attrition rate assumptions, and how we do it at the lowest level, meaning each individual level, attrition at an individual level, by department, and how those departments and those individuals support the different portfolio companies. So it intertwines with the time tracking tool. And then, most importantly, we've also lifted and shifted our data stack of our consolidation of our P&Ls into Anaplan so that we can have kind of all of our tools in finance, specifically FP&A, within Anaplan. And really the purpose being, we needed to build a great foundation of how we were going to build our planning team, not just for what we need right now, but what we need 5 years from now. And that was something that I've learned along the way, that we would always address issues for what's going on in this moment, and we didn't get ahead of things that we needed to be 3, 4, 5 years from now as the business grows and gets more complicated, and the data becomes more complicated. So those are some of the things that we've been working on and putting in place.
And you both touched on it a little bit, but just the breadth of how you can use the platform. Want to double click into kind of the value that you've received from the most recent implementations that we've done with your team, specifically on the workforce front. You touched a little bit on timing components of that workforce piece. Jay, there's a whole other complexity within headcount management at Blackstone. Can you just touch a little bit on the value of those two specific models, and how the design and functionality of both has given you, what you wanted out of the platform for those workforce pieces?
Well, I'll speak for how we're using, and this goes for any of the models that we've built in Anaplan. As someone who leads our planning team, as much as I love to geek out and nerd out about data, and I love analytical tools to help me see insights, if we can't spend time with business leaders going over those insights and helping them make great business decisions, then it really doesn't matter how great the tool is. So for us, the biggest value, and there's a lot of value in it, but the biggest value for me is it has freed up my team to not have to go through just an intense amount of effort to update model after model after model that aren't talking to each other, and having data that is slightly off from this model versus that model, and spending time reconciling why we've got a head count that's 3 FTEs off over here and why comp is slightly off over there versus HR's files. That's a waste of time, and it doesn't allow me to sit down with my executives and go over what's our plan, how are we navigating some of the situations that we find ourselves in, and how do we actually add value. So for me, the biggest added value of this is just the amount of time that it has saved our team to be able to actually sit with business leaders and actually do financial planning and analysis, not financial modeling and analysis. So that's been something I think has been critical.
Yeah, I would definitely echo everything Abraham just said. At Blackstone, the impact of the workforce planning models we built was creating a single source of truth for forward-looking headcount information. And in doing so, in addition to reducing the redundancies of requests, freeing up capacity, et cetera, it's allowed us to standardize views across our groups so that leadership is looking at it views things in the same way and able to make quick decisions. I think even though it was a small part of the build, the management reporting capabilities that Anaplan's built out, where a lot of our leaders are used to seeing things in PowerPoint format, we were able to kind of fully customize, PowerPoint slides that in real time were updating from planners' usage in Anaplan. We were able to empower all of our users to go through their headcount planning processes and conduct their own internal reviews with their own leadership, using those templates, knowing that that's the same thing that then upper management would see when we went back to them with the full firm results. And our users loved that, kind of having that connectivity of knowing this is the way we're telling this story and this is what it looks like.
Go ahead.
Can I add one more thing about some of the value? I think allowing the business to be a part of the process of the planning, the forecasting, and the journey from building out these models, instead of being just someone you sit next to and say, hey, here's the output of this model. the more we can take our executive team and the functional leaders through the journey of forecasting and why the numbers are the numbers, and being able to use these. So, being able to have a user face that is easy for them, that they can sit there and make sense of it. Because I think at times finance people, we take for granted that some of the data makes sense to them. It's easy, it's digestible. When you sit in front of people in IT, you sit in front of people in digital departments or other functional areas, it's not as intuitive as we like to think it is. And so the ease of being able to quickly change the way the models look, being able to change the illustration of some of the graphs, it's been very helpful.
Yeah, and thank you. I want to kind of double click on that as well. I mean, you've obviously had multiple years of experience developing solutions on the platform. Can you share some of the lessons that you've learned when migrating existing business processes into the platform? And specifically, you kind of just touched on it, right? But an implementation within the platform is an opportunity to change those business processes, right? To use that platform and its best architecture, design, and functionality to shift the way that you think about how the business operates. Would love to hear your perspective on that as well a little bit more.
Yeah, I'll start on this one. The last session actually did a great job touching on this topic. They said, hey, the first thing is allowing the functional leadership that ultimately uses this information to feel like that they understand it, that they can use it, that it's something that makes sense for them. So there's a lot of stakeholder management to be able to sit down with someone who's used to a different tool, a different analytical tool, a legacy product that's still hanging around the enterprise, and sitting there and say, hey, we're going to lift and shift this model and the way you've been doing it into a different way of doing it. And sometimes we're going to lift and shift this from your department into our department because this folds in better. And there can be confrontation with that. There can be a little bit of rub there because one, it may make department leaders feel like you're taking work from them, or it may make them feel like you're changing something that doesn't need to be changed. It works just fine. I'll always go back to partnership and relationships with people is critical. If you were to ask really what's the biggest takeaways of learning how to implement new things, everybody loves seeing a new way of looking at data. I've never had to convince someone, look at this data this way, it looks great, it's beautiful. Everybody wants to see that. What they don't always love to do is go through the journey of learning a new thing. And so there's just a little bit of hand-holding, but if you show them and you have a great vision of what the end product looks like, that's the key. If you don't have a great vision to explain what the end product's going to look like, that's where you have a tough time with the journey.
100%. And I think probably one of my lessons is what I learned is at the very beginning, take the time to really flesh out requirements and prototypes more so than you think you would ever need to. I think, Alpha's been a great partner, and we both recognized after the first build, everything went successfully. But there were some kinks that if we had really taken the time to pause on starting the build, we could have probably caught a few things earlier in that process. Also, just on the kind of the people management side of things in terms of lessons learned, a challenge for us is keeping accountability with the business users, but having them in some cases only be occasional users. It's hard to get them to want to learn how to use Anaplan to its full potential. So, I don't have a magic wand for that, but I think the solution is generally give them all the time that you can to help them. And specifically, what I would say is our rule of thumb has been don't compromise on best practices, but otherwise kind of flex and sacrifice for your users in whatever way you need. So for our first planning cycle, for example, some users, the way that a page was built didn't quite work for the way they were looking at their organization. We built one-time use pages for them, literally knowing that we're going to phase you out of this, but we want to make this an easier transition for you. One group that's going to have explosive growth. We do our headcount planning on a line-by-line, name-by-name level, and to put in all those name-by-name changes was going to be really onersome. So our team volunteered to just help them go through it. They already had an Excel, and we went through and helped to do the name-by-name changes. Those kind of things go a long way in encouraging those users to kind of buy into it, even in the stages where you're still figuring things out.
Yeah, the platform's customizable enough to fit any business process, right? But I think where we've really seen, kind of that condensed time to value in those repeatable business processes is when we leverage, kind of best practice architecture, functionality, and design. Jay, I want to talk with your group a little bit more about that as well. the most recent implementation we did, starting from kind of a point of view of how we do this operational workforce model versus a blank canvas approach, can really, help guide decisions, right, and turn it into more of a customization, less of a customization exercise and more of a configuration to here's how industry standard best practices. How does your company differ from that, right? And we're going to get you 70% of the way there. The rest of the 30% is going to be unique to Blackstone, unique to Revantage.
Yep. Yeah. So for us, it blew me away because at previous firms, I had only built Anaplan models from scratch, from the ground up, in really complex ways. Alpha came to us with a pre-established model that could work for workforce planning for us, and we were actually able to complete the build in, I think it was about 7 weeks or so, which would have taken us many more months to do if we had done it from scratch. I would say from all of Blackstone perspective, the vast majority of use cases, we wouldn't see kind of a pre-established model working because of the nuance of the business. But for something like workforce planning, which is a really repeatable process, it's something that virtually all companies do. There's just different perspectives and certain functionality that you would probably turn on and off depending on the firm. I'm totally bought into it, and it's created a great experience for us to be able to have a more iterative approach to building. So even after we redid our initial build, we were really thoughtful about going to stakeholders and getting continuous feedback along the way. And as we were getting that, it was very easy for Steve and team to go and turn on new features for us that users were asking for, or turn things off that weren't helpful. And so having that kind of like pre-established foundation that we could iterate on was really impactful.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the same process. I mean, we were able to implement in very, very short order. I think what I learned, and I've spent time in other type of products, I won't say their name at this conference, but what I would say is when I had to hire talent to come in and to help support those tools, I was having to hire very specific, very specific talent that could do it, where it was difficult to find them. And so if I wanted someone on my team that could help manage and be the administrator of this tool to just do the daily blocking and tackling, I felt like I had to really go out there and get like a developer that had, spent a lot of time in that particular system. And, when someone leaves, all of a sudden you're trying to backfill that, and we would never have the right person. So we're always having to use external resources. And I've learned that the biggest difference for me with Anaplan and my team is that I don't have to have people that are just real intense developers. Those that love financial modeling tend to gravitate towards this pretty easily. We have a great guy on our team, Drew Busby, who had Anaplan experience, learned how to do it in his last organization, not a developer background, or other team members, not development background, but they're financial planners. They have that, desire to kind of build out models, and it's just a lot more intuitive. So having a team with a couple resources on my team that kind of instinctually know how to help build this, then having partners, right, like Alpha, that come in and say, here's best practices, here's what we've seen, here's how we could do this. That partnership really allowed us to really grow what we do in an incredible amount of time, weeks, and not months, and not a half a year, which allows us to be agile. So when we have different needs of the business and we got to make changes and they got to be fast, I have a lot of confidence that in a matter of weeks we can get stuff done because I've got people on my team that understand it, that spent time with it, and I have business partners that support it.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously a reason why they're established best practices, right? And wanted to talk to Ankit a little bit here as well, as far as, you heard the story from Everest before in this session, and you look at operational workforce planning and how best to navigate that from an agility perspective, right, across different industries, but that is a repeatable use case. From what you've heard from the team here today, the latest and greatest iteration of this is bringing those applications, bringing that best practice architecture baked within the Anaplan platform. Can you speak a little bit about the?
Can everybody hear? Oh, can everybody hear me? Okay. All right. Right. Now, it's amazing to see what Blackstone Advantage have accomplished. Right. We want every customer to experience that, and we want them to experience it a lot faster. Right. And with Anaplan applications, I think that's our objective. Right. These are business problems that are out there that we can distill into an application based on best practices, right? That
help improve time to value. So you're basically getting live a lot faster. You're de-risking implementations, right? But also providing the same flexibility we're known from an Anaplan perspective, right? So all our applications that we're launching, including the operational workforce planning one, are all extendable because we know there's always going to be 20%, maybe 30% of a gap that is very unique to you as a customer. And that's what our intent is with applications, to provide the extendability. The other piece that Abram, you had hinted about was continuity, right? You leave, somebody leaves, how do you support that solution? And with applications, we're making a very concerted effort to have a high level of documentation. So if anybody's familiar with Anapedia, there's a whole application section in Anapedia now, right? Because we want to have thorough documentation available for our customers to be able to maintain the solution. The other piece is, you heard Adam speak today, right? And there's a $500 million investment that we're making in the innovation roadmap. A lot of those innovations are first coming to our applications because we believe innovations around AI, whether it's co-planner or reporting, are more consumable to our customers when they're wrapped up in a business problem or a solution, such as an application. So for example, co-planner is now going to be available now with the finance application later this month and shortly after operational workforce planning.
Thank you. Yeah, and I mean, that's why we're excited too, right? Bringing that time to value from our customers, and then we can expand into, more specific use cases, provide more value across the firm by getting into the specific Blackstone use cases, specific Revantage use cases, and obviously helps with user adoption, right? Landing that first successful implementation. Jay, you mentioned, business partners being happy, and then they're probably open to expanding those use cases a lot faster. I think that was all we had for today, unless you guys have any closing thoughts before Q&A.
I did want to have a quick shout out. So right in this room, right after this session,
Yes.
John Pitstick, who's my colleague, that is the product manager for the operational workforce planning application, will be demoing OWP, or operational workforce planning. It's a great way to see what has been built and what that means from an application construct.
And I think fits in very nicely with the best practices that we've been trying to see that come to life from a position-based, bottoms-up forecasting perspective. You'll get to see that, visually in the session coming up next.
No, I think the final thought I would have is, I think as we think about the things that we've learned throughout today, forecasting, budget, those are the conversations that planning people tend to really enjoy and understand a lot more. I think one of the things with Anaplan that's been a little bit different is, it's not just, like I said, we do time tracking, right? So it's not just your financial statements and your traditional FP&A core work, but think about Revantage. We do a lot of, there's transactions that come in, right, that we're helping to support. So there was a process where we were in a Excel tracking sheet, a new transaction would come out, and we'd have to sit there and think, okay, well, who's going to help with this? Who's, navigating through this transaction? What are the timings that it's going to be done? What are the services we're offering? And it was all being tracked via Excel and a bunch of emails back and forth between stakeholders. And we sat down as a planning team and with Drew, and we thought, we got to centralize this in an actual system. So we have an actual input system to intake these transactions, be able to track them, the details and the attributes that change over time before they're finalized. And we put it in Anaplan. It's just a process so that we now could go into Anaplan, pull up that tracking, and know this transaction, what dates it's coming in, who's servicing it. I mean, it's just a variety of things. And if we change it, if I go in and change an attribute, date, or whatever element, the next person could go in and it'll highlight in yellow what's changed. So I could automatically see this list of transactions with, oh, this change and that change. It's good to know it. I'll send out communication. That's not financial, planning. That's just really just staying organized. And so I think you can really look at Anaplan on a lot of different levels than just your financial statements.
Yeah, and I would add to that, to kind of reiterate the benefits of a pre-built model or an app. I think don't be afraid, I guess, of the kind of, if it doesn't seem like it's exactly what your org looks like, you really can flex it to meet what you need. Just the example I'll quickly give at Blackstone is, I've heard today from just about everybody else that they look at workforce planning on a position ID level, and I think it was even said that is the right way to do it. At Blackstone, we have a little bit of a different perspective, just in that we kind of view that all of our groups should constantly be reassessing their talent and their roles. So if someone leaves, that doesn't mean you should just automatically backfill that role. You should be constantly assessing where do I need talent in the highest impact area. So we do tend to build most of our workforce planning off of kind of our active and pending activity that's in the system. But that was still totally able to work, and we were able to build kind of cool add-on tools like a reconciliation page, so that the first time a user goes in for their planning cycle, they get to look at, here are the manual changes I made in Anaplan my last planning cycle. Since then, this is the activity that's come through Workday, and that activity is automatically reconciled for them based on the Anaplan plan IDs that are generated being loaded into Workday. So we've created that connectivity, and even though we are building on somewhat of a moving platform by building off of active headcount, we've been able to make it a really good process for people to be able to do that continuous planning exercise.
Right.
And have good partners like Alpha. It really helps.
All right. Well, thank you. That brings us to the bottom of the hour. We wanted to thank Abraham and Jay for sharing their Revantage and Blackstone stories. Steve Blemker from Alpha Alternatives for consistently great work as a great partner of Anaplan, and Ankit for his expertise. So give it up for a round of applause.